Welcome, everyone. So glad to see so many people here. Welcome. We have quite a few people signed up and quite a few people already coming in. We're going to take maybe a couple more minutes and just let people join us here. I've seen so far we've got representation from so many parts of the country and outside of the country even as well. So that's awesome. It's great that so many of you are able to join in or interested in the subject we have here. Maybe while we're waiting, just a couple quick questions that you can answer in the chat if you like. First one really is just how experienced are you as a landlord? Some of you may be just starting out. Some of you are seasoned pros. Some of you are a few years in. If we could see a couple of answers to that, that would be great to see. Well, there's so many comments in here.
I can't even keep up, Steve. It's crazy. We got 315 people right now and growing. It's incredible.
I see Lucy's 22 years, Brenda's 20 years. We've got some 7 years. We've got somebody here that says brand new, just learning about it. So great spectrum. It's awesome. I'm sure we could learn some things from some of you as well. Last question before we get started. What is your dream rental property? What is your dream rent? Maybe it's a cottage in the woods. Maybe it's a spot on the beach or a loft downtown. What's your dream rental property? Anybody have any ideas there? A triplex, a cottage on Lake Ontario, a vacation property with no tenants. Excellent. Nice. Free rental. Lots of good ideas. Okay, well, listen, thanks so much again for joining. We're here tonight for Landlord Lessons. If I knew then what I know now. As all of you know, like being a landlord might seem straightforward. You buy a property, you find a great renter, you rent it out, and you watch the income start rolling in. But as many of you have experienced, it's not always such exactly that scenario. You can have tenant issues, you can have unexpected expenses, you can have legal headaches, you can have maintenance and upkeep. There's a steep learning curve, obviously, to being a landlord and running a successful business. And really, that's why we're here tonight. Whether you're just starting out, whether you're a seasoned pro, whether you're considering getting into rental properties, this event really is about sharing lessons that landlords often learn the hard way. And we've got a great panel of experts here to share their stories with us so that you don't have to learn things the hard way. What we're going to cover tonight, as I said, we've gathered a panel of experts. They're going to pull back the curtain and talk to us about what they wish they had known when they started out. They'll be sharing their wins, their mistakes, and their best strategies for running a profitable rental business. I'm going to introduce every one of them as they start. So first, just get this out of the way. We have a legal disclaimer. This is obviously not legal advice. We're here to share information and share experience. But if you need legal advice, please consult a professional. Also, just a quick recording disclaimer. We are recording this webinar tonight. And so by participating, be aware that you're providing consent to share whatever it is that you might contribute to the webinar, because we will be sharing it beyond this live event. We'll be recording it and sharing it through various channels as well. So how can we get the most out of this event tonight? So let's dive in. This is really your chance to hear unfiltered advice from landlords who've been there. They've made some mistakes along the way, and they've also figured out what really works. So take notes, ask questions, try to get other distractions out of the way. Share your journey on socials as you can. And don't worry, as I said, we will be recording, so you will be able to refer to this in the future. There'll be some great information that you can take, and obviously, hopefully you can share as well within your social channels. I'm Steve Harmer. I'm going to be the moderator tonight, and I'll be guiding tonight's discussion. In my role at Front Lobby, I work closely with landlords and property managers. Our mission really is to help make renting fair and transparent. we've spent the last number of years working on solutions that help landlords find great tenants, reduce rent-related stress, and protect the important investments that you're making through screening and through rent reporting and through debt recovery. But most importantly, I've also learned that this is a challenging industry sometimes. And my job tonight is to really make sure that you get some great information from this excellent group of speakers, and that you can be left with some practical learnings that you can take away and improve your business with. So we have an incredible lineup. We're going to introduce each one of them, and they'll have some time to share some fabulous information with you. After which, we're going to take a few questions per speaker. And we'll also save some time at the end. Obviously, we've got a very big group in the webinar tonight, so we may not get to all your questions, but we'll leave you with some contact information as well. And we have some follow-up beyond the presentation this evening. So to start with, we're going to start with Hart Togman. Hart is a savvy landlord, an expert in tenant relationships. He's also the CEO of Panda, a property management platform and company helping landlords effectively maximize the value of their investments. He's helped countless landlords find and place quality tenants, and he'll be sharing his best strategies on how to attract great renters and avoid the ones that can cause headaches. Hart, over to you. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I'll say this is a pretty packed webinar. So with my limited time, I'm not going to be able to dive into all of the tips and tricks on tenant screening. That's probably 6, 7, 8 hours worth of content right there. But when we talk about the idea of what if I knew now what I knew back then, I go back to about 6 or 7 years ago when my story as a landlord really started. And I think about an instance where I didn't realize that my tenants were not the stereotypical, my perfect tenants were not the stereotypical tenants out there. So this was nearly 6 years ago, but honestly, just to kind of level set, we're in a really tough rental market right now. Vacancy rates are at a decade high. We're at almost 5% true vacancy rates for non-purpose-built rentals. The average time to lease is well up over 40 days. This is almost double what it was about 18 months ago. Rents are dropping across the province. We've seen upwards of 3 to 9% rent drops in the last 12 months, and that's across Ontario. And the tenant quality continues to slip. There's a lot of fraud these days in the market. There's lower credit scores, higher collections rates, worse income to rent ratios. But yet most landlords like me at the time were looking for AAA tenants. And us in the property management business kind of hate that idea of AAA tenants. But at the time, I was looking for the dual income, high salary, no pets, no dependents, great credit, and thought I knew what I was doing. And these days, those tenants are harder to come by. But 6 years ago, my wife and I had bought our first property, our primary home, and we were house hacking. So we renovated the basement, we found tenants, and we thought they were the perfect tenants. They were like us. They were dual income. They had no kids. They had no pets, although we had a pet. And on paper, they were absolutely perfect. And 5 months in, the complaints started. So first it was too cold for them. Then our footsteps upstairs were too loud for them. And then our dog's nails were keeping them up at night. And it frankly got to the point where we were literally tiptoeing around our own house. And when we watched TV, even at a low volume, they would literally bang on the ceiling with a broom, like Mr. Heckles from Friends. This is no joke. It was the real life situation of our first tenants. And eventually they said the situation was untenable. They turned around and left with almost no notice. And they left us with vacancy costs, with repair costs, and with a real headache on our hands. So over the next few years, we placed some B quality tenants, B plus tenants. They were solid, not perfect, but no drama. And then about a year and a half ago, we had another vacancy in our basement. And by then we had managed about 600 units. We've placed thousands of tenants across all of Ontario. And we knew a little bit more about tenant placement and realized that the AAA tenants are not necessarily the people that were right for us. And we stumbled across a young new immigrant couple. And on paper, they were not great. They had no credit scores, We still pulled them, but they did not have one. Their landlord reference didn't speak English, but we still called and we still verified through Geo Warehouse that they were truly the landlord of that property. All of their income was in cash, but we were able to pull income verification and bank statements directly to verify that they were getting that cash through the door. And we did our checks, but ultimately we went with people we felt good about. You know, they had a story, but they weren't telling us a sob story. They were being frank, they were being honest. And we took a calculated risk because we had done it hundreds and thousands of times, literally. And they turned out to be great tenants. They worked hard, they were rarely home, they were very quiet when they were. You know, they slipped up on rent a couple of times when times were tough, but they let us know transparently and they quickly recouped, you know, any arrears. And ultimately, my wife and I just moved about a month ago, and we brought those tenants with us to our new property. So it was, you know, 5 kilometers away in a totally different neighborhood in Toronto with different rents and even a different number of bedrooms in the property. And we just had a frank conversation with those tenants and asked them to come live with us. And so they moved with us on the same day. So we moved 2 families, closed 2 houses on the same day. It was an absolute pleasure. They helped us move, we helped them move. And most importantly, as a landlord, we had rents coming in from day one, and we've got a 1-week-old at home, so we were in no place to search for new tenants right away. But we have great tenants, we have rent coming through the door, we're not greedy about that rent. And ultimately, these tenants who may not have been the perfect tenants on paper ended up being our AAA tenants. And with property management, we see AAA tenants all the time. And oftentimes, especially in this type of market that is more tenant driven, they are much more difficult. They're much more demanding. They know and action their rights. And in this market, that's hard to combat against. And ultimately, we really caution all landlords out there to understand your rental property and find tenants that are right fit for you. So that's my quick little story. Lots to dive into and unpack about how to find and place difficult tenants. We've got a freebie giveaway that'll come out to everyone later, just about 7 strategies to place tenants in a tight rental market. But that's my story about my landlord journey.
Hart, thank you so much. That was excellent. I really appreciate you sharing that. And it sounds like it's not just good for you, but great for your tenants as well. So it's a win-win situation. If people have questions for Hart, we're gonna try to pick through a couple of questions that are coming in, and pop them up here on the screen. I see first comment from Sabir. Thank you so much. I used Rent Panda services 3 years ago. Great team. Definitely be using them again. That's a great testimony to the work that you're doing there, Hart. Yeah, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. And if there are no questions, then we can carry on. It is hard to keep track of what's going on in this chat, to be honest, because it is busy. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hart. And again, if okay, there is a question from Deepti here. I saw it momentarily and it's gone. There we go. What documents you can legally ask for when you're screening a potential tenant? So there's a question for you, Hart.
Yeah, for sure. So it will vary by province a little bit, but I would say there's a whole host of documents that you can ask for. You know, you're going to want to verify income. You're going to want to verify or employment if they have employment. You're going to want to look into landlord reference checks, into background checks, into credit checks. You can do income verification, like I mentioned. But ultimately, my one bit of advice is don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try and put together a list of documents that you can ask for. There are lots of providers out there that have pre-screening documents or pre-screening questionnaire. They have full screening questionnaires, and relying on the digital services that are out there are much safer than relying on just collecting documents. So at Rent Panda, when we screen tenants, we don't accept credit checks provided by any tenants themselves. There's way too much fraud in the market. The same thing with background checks, the same thing with income documents. Everything can be made fraudulent so easily these days. So don't collect any documents. Use screening providers to automatically pull those documents directly to you without the tenant's interference, essentially, and you'll be much safer off.
Yeah, great. That's really important. Thank you. I've got another question here from Rosanna. How did you check that the previous landlord was the correct person you were talking to? I couldn't catch it in your story.
Yeah, great question. So we've all been in that situation where you call up a landlord reference, and it may be, cousin Jimmy pretending to be the landlord. So what we like to do is we have a set of questions that we ask that don't allude to the fact that we're calling for a reference check right away. We ask them about their investment property. We ask them to confirm the address. We ask them to confirm the name of their previous tenant during a specific date range. But ultimately, Geo Warehouse is a great asset to use. Accessed by primarily realtors, but all of us in our lives, I'm sure, know a realtor. So poke your realtor buddy, ask them to pull the Geo Warehouse record for the address of the property that's been given to you, and cross-reference that between the name of the person that's being provided to you as the landlord reference and the person on the phone. And usually you get a pretty good hit. You can't check corporations and things like that, but I would say 80-90% of the time you're dealing with a single individual who will be listed as the owner on Geo Warehouse.
Okay, excellent. That's a great tip, Hart. Thank you so much for that. Great. Well, I think we'll move on. We can, as I said, we can add some additional questions in the future. We'll save some time at the end. We're next going to hear from Kayla Andrade. She's the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch. She's an ambassador for landlord rights and credit reporting, and she's also a dedicated landlord and a landlord advocate. She really understands the policy side of the rental industry, and she's going to be talking about some of the biggest challenges that landlords face today and what you can do to protect yourself in the environment that we're in. So thanks very much for joining us, Kayla. We'll move it over to you and love to hear what you have to share with us today.
So we start the clock. Okay, try to.
That was interesting timing. We
Hosting.
lost Kayla right as we needed her. We're going to come back to you, Kayla, as we get the technical side of things sorted out. And we're going to just, Kayla, are you with us?
I think so. I think I was.
Okay.
No one wants me to talk. Is the government listening right now?
It depends what you're advocating for, but we've got you here. So let's bring Kayla up on the screen if we can, and let's hear what Kayla has to share with us tonight. Thanks, Kayla.
Well, first, I would like to make sure that everyone is giving themselves a round of applause for being here on this webinar so that you're able to learn not only from the speakers on stage, but these awesome comments that I'm seeing that's happening here. You're honestly being able to help one another, and this is great, and education is key to what we have to do as landlords. I would like to talk about, what my experience was, what I would like to know, what I know now, what I would like to know when I first started, and that was about how involved government is in this housing industry. And I started off, being a landlord. I had a 5-plex at the time, and we had a city councilor who came by that rental property and told us that the city of Cambridge was making landlords responsible for their tenants' delinquent utility bills. Not knowing about politics, not knowing about what level of government does what, I was able to have my hand held by one of the candidates that was running. And she told me, this is what you do. This is how you advocate. And we got our landlords together. We had a protest at City Hall. Never had a protest before in my life, but this was about me relating to people on Kijiji and telling them, hey, this is what's happening. We need to get down to City Hall, and we need to be able to try to stop this and voice our concerns with this water billing. That petition that we created through just the water billing, it went all over because it was that water billing was spreading right across Ontario. And what happened is that it was coming back with notes from landlords and property managers asking me to help them fight the Residential and Tenancy Act and Landlord and Tenant Board. So I brought a lot of our landlords together into a Facebook group so that we can help and understand what the RTA is, what the Landlord and Tenant Board is, because we didn't really know what that was about when I first started into properties when I was 18 years old. Then we started finding out what level of government does what. So from the federal government sets the national housing strategy and the funding of the programs, and the provincial government is doing the Landlord and Tenant Board and the Residential and Tenancy Act. And municipal government is getting into bylaws such as landlord licensing, property standards. So municipal government is really coming down on landlords right across Ontario, and we need to be able to bring that education to landlords. And this is why we want to be able to put our landlords in this group. So when things are happening, that the community is able to inform us a lot quicker, because media doesn't let us know as quick as we possibly would benefit from knowing what's being happening at our city hall. I also didn't know that you could be a part of your city or part of the provincial committees and have your voice, being able to take your voice and help them shape whatever bylaw or policy they're actually trying to do. I've been privileged enough to be accepted on the water billing task force for the city of Cambridge recently, and I'm also on the Affordable Housing Reserve Working Group. So this is the part where we've now created that friendship with our elected officials, and we need our other landlords and property managers in the community to do the same in their area. We do have power in numbers. And lastly, I don't know how much time I have. No one's going to be putting in the notes. Let me know how much time. But it was rent reporting. I wish we had rent reporting back when I started almost 23 years ago. Rent reporting, I feel, is a part of my advocacy. This is now a part of what is allowing us to keep spreading the word about repercussions. I've seen a lot of the chats here. People are like, it's horrible in Ontario. We need a landlord's bill of rights. And you know what? I want to make sure that we have you invited to the roundtable discussion that is happening at Queen's Park on April 28th to the 29th. There is very limited spots, but this is where we're going to be meeting with our elected officials and voicing our recommendations. They know our problems. We now need to be able to voice our recommendations and get them to start listening, not only from a landlord, but this is a way for us to take it also from the tenants, because good tenants are suffering. Our bad landlords are obviously either benefiting from it, but they're getting caught because of all these different type of policies that are coming down, and unfortunately the good landlords are having to deal with that as well. So that is my little take. I obviously want to make sure that I answer some of the questions that you guys have. Obviously you guys know where to find me on Facebook. I'm always I'm take great pride in answering as many questions and talking to landlords, because I don't think there's a lot of support. And I've always wanted to be that support for the last 15 years for our landlords. But we do need to come together. And I'm glad that we're able to pull as many people together now to not only give you this information, but to learn more about advocacy. And I'm excited to be able to teach you guys more about what I do and how you can get involved.
Perfect, Kayla. Thank you so much. You have been such a great advocate for so many of us, so many landlords over the course of the years that you've been working. So definitely appreciate it, and appreciate you taking some time to share some of that with us this evening. We have a question for you from Antoine. Do you report the tenants' paying habits to the Rent Bureau, and how do you do it?
Well, so one, you're going to be able to report monthly and former tenants' debt to the credit bureaus, which is Equifax and Landlord Credit Bureau, through Front Lobby, frontlobby.com. So go into there, you register the tenants, you just need their full name and their birth date. If you're looking for ways to try to find their birthday, give me a message. I'll teach you little tricks that I do to get their birthday. But this is a part of that initial tenant screening process with your application. And this is where you'll be able to reach out to all the experts. We definitely have our rental application that makes sure we get a lot of the information that you're going to need to make sure that you're picking that great tenant.
Thanks, Kayla. I would just add to that, you can put the consent to report rents into your lease clauses as well, as a great way to start things off. And obviously, you want their consent to help them build credit. You don't need it to report their debts necessarily, but if you want to help them build credit with their positive payments,
it's best yet, Steve. We have to do it when you're showing them the rental unit. So when they're all excited for it, and then you're like, oh, by the way, I can actually report your monthly rent payments to Front Lobby to help you grow your credit. But if you don't pay, it also impacts your credit, and their face just drains. And then you start to figure out, you got a good one or you got a bad one before you even pull the credit.
There you go. Thanks. And we got a question here from Deep T. What happens if a tenant changes their name after the landlord has filed an L1?
Oh, good golly.
Might be a question for a paralegal, but
yeah, like I don't know about that. Like I like to go based on what's on the rental application and then pulling it right into the form that you're going to be filing for the L1. And then if anything happens, I would just be like, can you give me a date in which you changed your name so that I can update it on the records? And then put that as evidence inside of the portal so that they don't try to, throw out your application based on names. But the government has came out and did say that they are going to start to allow minor mistakes to be dealt with at the landlord and tenant board, and that it wouldn't qualify for them to dismiss your application. Great.
One more question, Kayla. How does the everyday landlord get involved in advocating for their rights? Great question.
Well, first step is getting into Ontario Landlords Watch, either following us on our public page or inside of the group. If you are not in the group, just mention that you found out about Ontario Landlords Watch through this webinar so I can get you in quickly. 2 is that I want you to start following all of your elected officials from municipal to provincial to federal. And then I want you to really know who Doug Downey is, the Attorney General, and making sure that you're reach out to me. I got a petition. We're calling for his resignation. and vote Conservative in the federal election.
No politics, please.
Sorry, man, you got me invited.
All right. Well, Kayla, thanks so much. Again, we'll have some time for questions at the end here. Appreciate it. We're going to move on. Our next speaker is Kevin Costain. Kevin is the board chair at Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario, also known as SOLO. And he's going to tell us firsthand sort of the consequences of bad tenant screening. He actually wrote a book about it and the impact of it. So he's a former landlord who learned the hard way. He's going to have there's some horror stories maybe to share, but also some learnings and some red flags that you can see and learn from, so that you can avoid some of those same challenges and issues along the way. So Kevin, thanks very much for joining us. Look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate everybody so far, and Hart and Kayla for the presentations. And so I'm Kevin, the chair of SOLO. We generally at SOLO Ontario advocate for small landlords in every way possible. One of our goals is to help educate housing providers, and things like this, like webinars, they're really great for that. And one of the best way to learn is from mistakes, and frankly, from my mistakes, if I would say it. Some of you may have heard my story, the one where my tenant burned my house down. You might be thinking, well, you didn't do anything wrong. They burned your house down. Well, that's not quite true. I made a ton of mistakes, and not the least of which was letting the tenant rent my house in the first place. This tenant caused complete destruction, and it was a total loss. This cost approximately $400,000 to repair and 16 months to rebuild. Of course, as Steve mentioned, I wrote a book about these experiences. My book, From Rent to Ruin, is shameless plug. It's available on our website, solo.ca, or it's on Amazon. But when I think about how little I knew then and what I would have done differently, some important things kind of stand out to me. One of the things was that I needed to go with my gut. In meetings with the tenant, something felt off. I mostly ignored that feeling, and I should have stopped to just investigate more. It might have led to me denying the tenant. One of the biggest mistakes, probably the biggest, was taking a credit report directly from the tenant. Documents are so easily forged, and even more today, that's the case. And you want to get credit reports from trusted sources. You can get them from so many places. I think you can get it even from Front Lobby. You can Rent Panda does property management. You can get them from Single Key. There are so many places to get credit reports, and some of these places actually let you pass on the cost of the tenant. So there's no excuse for taking a credit report directly from the tenant, ever. Another sort of red flag was that it was a rush. He was in a rush to pay. He was in a rush to rent the place sight unseen. I kind of pushed back on it at the time, but it was, I didn't push back enough. Often that's kind of a red flag and something you really want to just know about or think about, because sometimes it causes misdirection so they can get into a property. One of the other mistakes I made was just contacting only one previous landlord, or maybe the current landlord. By calling only the most recent landlord, I limited my options. So you always go back further than the current or most recent contact they offer, and talk to them, find out more about the tenant. Often the current landlord is trying to unload the tenant with a glowing reference, and you get a little bit shortchanged. So you want to think about that when you're kind of renting your property. Most important is just to learn. Like I if I knew then what I know now, I would be learning everything possible that I could learn. So don't wait and come to solo when you're in crisis mode. We handle a lot of landlords that are in crisis, and frankly, if we learn more, we could head this off earlier, and so many people's lives would be a lot easier. And so just think about that. There's so many learning resources out there, from Ontario Landlord Watch to Solo. Solo has a wiki on site that we built for a ton of resources, and there are so many more learning resources that are being built even as we speak. So always look to learn more, and hopefully you're going to gain some insight on this webinar as well. It just basically allows you to protect your property and save pain later. So I thank everybody for being here and trying to learn more. Back then I thought I did a good job of screening based on my limited knowledge. When I think back to that, what's important is not to beat yourself up. Always try to do better. And every day we're always collectively as a community making each other better. So join the community in any way you can, and use the resources that are out there. I am so grateful for all the great resources that we have available to all small landlords, whether it be Open Room, Front Lobby, Rent Panda, others. Use these tools regularly and protect your investment. And that's really mainly my spiel for now. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm here.
Kevin, thank you so much. We do have some questions coming in, and also I saw comments of somebody who'd read your book and recommended it, and also somebody who is very impressed with the work that Solo's been doing. So appreciate you doing all the work that you're doing on behalf of all the small landlords. From rent to ruin, there we go. I have a question, but I'm going to start with Randall's question. We have a question from Randall. When it comes to credit reports, do you have a recommendation for applicants who are newcomers to the country? Because that is a reality, right? And I think Hart touched on this earlier. There was a great tenant, but not a great credit history in Canada. So how do you address that issue? And what other things can you do if that's the scenario that you're looking at?
Right, and I'm by no means an expert in this, but I am aware that you tend to have some credit history in the country they're coming from, so maybe you can track that down. There are services online that I think can look into credit ratings in other countries. I know some other folks on the panel might speak to that a little bit better, but it is definitely a challenge if you can't find services that will provide credit reports. And sometimes you have to look at alternative means of assessing the tenant. And maybe the credit report is not the only disqualifier. Maybe there are other factors. Maybe there's a payment history, as Hart mentioned. Maybe there are other things that you can do to qualify the tenant and to be sure that they're going to be good. So,
for sure. Employment records are important, obviously, as well. Hart, do you want to weigh in on that particular question when it comes to new to country applicants? How best way to handle them?
Yeah, and I actually popped a little response in the chat, but ultimately Kevin's right in that there's international credit checks now that are available. But I would assume that someone coming to the country may not necessarily have an international credit check available, and just go beyond the credit check. Like I did with my initial good tenant, we want to look at where their income is coming from and really dive down into whether or not that's a stable form of income. You want to look at a background check. You want to make sure they have no judgments against them. So checking Camly and Open Room. A lot of people rely too heavily on a credit check. And then just acknowledge that if you are going to rent to that individual with no credit history, they are slightly higher risk. Not to say that they're bad tenants. My whole spiel was about how great tenants are not necessarily AAA. But they are slightly higher risk. So if you're uncomfortable with that as an investor and landlord, then maybe it's not the right tenant for you.
Right. I think the other thing as well is spend more time on your reference checks in that scenario, right? Because there are other good people out there they may have been renting from. And so spend more time digging into some of the other aspects as well. Yeah.
Yes, and as you said, credit is not particularly everything. I see one comment that Colombian history is public. Maybe that, often I think it's going to be per country. You'll have different scenarios that you can look into, and maybe even services even in Canada that you can go to find out more. But I think Hart's right. You don't want to just definitely focus only on credit. because it's kind of the whole picture when it comes to a possible tenant, right?
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions for Kevin before we move on? Excellent. Well, again, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you sharing with us,
Great.
and appreciate all the work that you're doing on behalf of the small landlords in Ontario as well. Our next speakers, in plural, Danielle Chiasson and Kory MacKinnon. Danielle is the CEO of Strategic Success Consulting, and together with Kory, who's a real estate investor and real estate coach, they're going to dive into the challenge of grandfathered tenants. So obviously, sometimes when you're investing in a building, it's coming, and it's often a good thing. It's coming with tenants already intact, and but there are times too when you have inherited long-term tenants who are paying below market rents. And Danielle and Kory are going to share with us some ways that you can strategically, legally, and profitably navigate that scenario of grandfathered tenants. So, thanks very much for joining us, Danielle and Kory. Looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us tonight. Thank you.
Whoop, whoop. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Okay, so I just saw a question here from Ken Kortner. He said, do folks do criminal record checks? The answer is yes. Actually, if you go to my Facebook, I did a live on this because I had a tenant who was just miserable and later found out because I had to have them physically removed from the property. They had a criminal record. And so now that is definitely in my process. About grandfathered tenants, again, like Hart said at the top of the hour when we started the webinar, there's just not enough time for us to go through every single thing that we can share with you here tonight, but we hope that we give you some tidbits. And the one that Kory and I want to share with you guys is really be careful about buying properties with grandfathered tenants. Okay, we have this happen in our community with our students. They're always like, when they start underwriting and they see the numbers and the numbers look really great, but typically the rents will be low with these tenants, and they think, okay, we can get them out. As we know, in tenant-friendly provinces and states, like the one that Kory and I invest in Ontario, it's really hard to get tenants out if they're paying the rent. And so you're stuck with that tenant. So if they have a criminal background, and they are constantly having cops over, they might give a hard time to other tenants. They might not take care of the property. And these are things that you need to consider, okay? Grandfathered tenants are one of the reasons why people will sell income producing properties. If it's income positive, you might want to ask yourself, why are they offloading? And that's a question to ask, because there could be 2 or 3 bad tenants in there. That's just a nightmare. The other thing is too, if you're looking at a property that is numbers, where the numbers work, but it might be in an area that is really, really bad, or even just semi-bad, and then you're going to have issues with that because the tenants that you're attracting in that neighborhood are going to be below average where you want. And the problem with doing that and having that in your portfolio is that you're going to have too much time, which is one of your resources that you really want to be protective of, and capital in managing that property. And so managing those tenants. And I know Kory here has a story that he's going to share, but you really want to be careful about those grandfathered tenants. And yes, you haven't done your due diligence on them properly. There might have been a vacant unit and they're wanting to sell, and they just put anybody in there for the sake of putting somebody, and they haven't been vetted properly. Maybe they're a nightmare tenant. So these are things that you really want to be cautious of, okay? I know and I'm talking from my personal experience here, and Kory's going to say the same. When I had issues with tenants, it was always with grandfathered tenants. And guys, I'm telling you, one thing that you want to keep in mind is doing a proper due diligence on your tenants is the #1 insurance policy you're going to have in protecting your investment, okay? So do the work. You're going to see right from the get-go with Hart starting out, do your tenant vetting. And if you don't do that, it's the pay now or pay later program. So if you don't do the work now, you're going to do it later. Okay. Kory.
Well, it's so important. Many times investors will see the numbers on a property. They're like, this is like a 9 cap or a 10 cap. You know, those don't happen in every market, but lots of times they're looking at the numbers and they're not realizing like the neighborhood that it's in and, you know, how rough that can be. Because yes, time is your only non-renewable resource. And your biggest asset in your toolbox is a real estate investor. So You have to make sure that you're underwriting the tenants in the property as well. So many people will have like their furnace inspector, their roofer, their electrician, their plumber, their best home inspector in their Rolodex come and inspect everything about the property, but they actually don't do any due diligence on the tenants. You can actually have conversations with them. You can get to know them. You can try to understand quickly, is this tenant going to be amicable? Are they going to work with the new, sheriff in town, who's going to be managing this property properly and trying to make it profitable, or are they going to be just a pain in your side? So, I've had this happen before as well with inherited tenants before. If you guys want to know a crazy story, so 3 people living in a bachelor unit, 6 cats, and they're like, don't worry, we're leaving in 2 months. So I was like, okay, great. This won't be a problem for very long. Well, they definitely had a huge party on the way out. They went to the dollar store, got lots of green and red paint, and painted the appliances. The walls had a competition of how many holes they could kick in the walls. Fortunately, it was all surface level type of stuff, and we're going to renovate the unit anyways. I've heard horror stories of tenants that'll put a rag in the sink and just leave the water running and say, see you later. That didn't happen. But again, when you do buy a property with inherited tenants, you have to let them know politely, like what your, or gently, I guess, like what the plan is for the building. And if they aren't on board with it, then give them some options that they can actually work with you on. I've had tenants that have said, hey, I actually want to stay and I'm okay with paying more rent, right? I just don't want to move. And then we work with them on that. You have people where it's just a fight, and there's other ways that landlords can, work within your own legal rights to, have them reviewed. It might have to go to a hearing and an order and a sheriff and all that sort of stuff, but it's your right to inspect your units. It's your right to make sure that you have safety in the building. So it's kind of crazy, but yeah.
Grandfather tenants are the worst, man. Like all the problems that I've had, and anybody I've evicted except for one were from a grandfather tenant. And honestly, like usually if the landlord is selling a profit producing property, there's a good chance that is because there's a problem with the tenant. So just dig deeper, guys. Ask some questions. If it's in a multi-unit building, you can talk to the tenants and just say, hey, like, is there anybody here that, seems to not get along with other people? And then you can quickly identify who the problem tenant is, and then dig deeper and see whether or not that's an issue that you want to have, because essentially you're buying somebody else's headache. So make sure you do your due diligence. It's not just on the property, but you also want to do your due diligence on the tenants that are existing, and always, always, always vet your tenants going into a building. Steve.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you. That's great information. I think, it really hits home. You inspect the furnace. If you don't inspect the tenants, it's way more important than inspecting the furnace. The furnace is sometimes easier to replace than the tenant.
Easier.
Right? Like if you have the wrong tenant, that's right. Exactly. And a lot less expensive as well in that scenario. So that's great information. Do we have any questions for Danielle and Kory? So here we go from Fabiola. Thank you. Any tips on how to have good due diligence in terms of questions to ask for their references?
Yeah, so here's a good one, and Hart's going to be all over this too. But I'm going to tell you right now, when you're asking for references, don't ask for their current landlord. Or if it's a current tenant, ask for a previous landlord reference if you want any references from existing tenants or potential tenants. So ask for their previous landlord. If you ask for a current landlord and they have problems, the current landlord might not give you the information that's truthful because they want to get rid of this tenant because they want them out of their unit to put them into your unit. So always ask for the previous landlord information, and that's who you should be calling. It's really important to vet the references well, 100%.
And have some open-ended questions. Don't just ask yes/no questions. Like, did they pay rent on? Like, there's all the basic questions. You've probably been asked them before as well, because you get phone calls about getting references for some of your tenants that are leaving your buildings. But maybe ask a question like, was there ever a challenging situation that came up with the property where it was like no heat or no water for a day or something like that? Like, how were they to work with in that situation, right? Get them to describe and try to find some pain points that may have happened in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really want to understand the personalities as well, right? You want to understand who you're dealing with from a personal perspective. We've got another great question here from Jayashri. If the grandfathered tenant agrees to a rental increase, can they go back and claim it as an illegal increase? And how do you handle that scenario, basically?
Yeah, well, handling that scenario is pretty black and white as far as the landlord tenant board is concerned in Ontario, and I can only speak in Ontario. And I want to preface this: we've got 426 people right now currently on the live stream. It's going to be different in every province, so make sure you talk to your paralegal here. But in Ontario, if you have an agreement with a potential tenant and they agree to an increase that's above what we're entitled to increase in 12 months, they could at month 11 say, you know what, actually, I don't agree to that, and have you pay back the difference from their original rent to the increase for the 11 months before. Now, after month 12, after they've paid you 12 times, it is now the implied new rent. So it's called implied consent, and then that will be set. But for the first 12 months, there is a danger zone there, guys. They could claw that back and ask you to pay them all of that back.
That's quite an interesting risk. It'd be good to consult a paralegal to see if there's a way to address that from a contracting perspective. But it's a great question.
Here's the thing. Well, but here's the thing, Steve. You can't. Here's the thing that people don't understand. You cannot contract your way out of the law. If it is mandated, if it's written in law, then you cannot agree to a contract, write it down on paper, and then say, well, this is going to stick because we agreed to it and it's written down in a contract. So if it is law, you can't overwrite that with a contract.
Yeah, great point. The law always is going to supersede the contract, for sure.
That's right.
Yeah. Another question here from Elizabeth. Thank you. Is there some sort of disclosure checklist that can be used when using a property manager since paying for their due diligence?
Okay, so I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but when dealing with property managers, it's kind of a pain point. So it's kind of a thorn in your side. Here's the thing: as an owner, if you hire a property manager, your job is to manage the manager. Okay. So the biggest problem that most property owners have when they hire a manager, they just expect the manager to do the job well. And then they wash their hands and they say, no, I got a property manager, and they leave it alone, which is fine because it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? And so how I like to do things, I'm very hands-on with my property managers. I communicate with them regularly, and I have a process and things that I want them to do. And I tell them, this is what my expectations are. And if they can't give me that, because a lot of property managers will not do the same level of due diligence that you require. So one way around that is actually just to hire a leasing agent, like Panda can do that for you. They do a very serious vetting system. I personally use them. And actually, by the way, Hart, I got a call from Varun today, so I think we're good. Anyway, I personally use them. I'm actually leasing one right now with them. And yeah, they go through, and they send me all of the information, and that's what I expect. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to get that from a property manager. So if your property manager just doesn't kind of come up to par, well, that's okay. Just say, you know what, you're going to use a leasing agent instead that can meet that, because some property managers are just too busy managing the day-to-day operations of properties that they're going to fall maybe a little bit short on the due diligence. So you should have a checklist. Again, Hart has a whole thing. I think, is that part of what you're giving away tonight, Hart, is the due diligence checklist?
Not quite, but if anyone books a call, they can chat about that.
Yeah, so reach out to Hart for that. I also have a checklist. But yeah, you know what? You definitely need to have your due diligence. At the very minimum, you should have their verify their income, verify their employment, get their credit score. I do also do criminal record check. That's up to you guys if you want to do that or not. Check their ID, verify their ID, and do all of, and listen, you want to use some third-party apps to help you with that. So we use Single Key to do a lot of the due diligence, and they'll do all of that for you. And that actually takes away the liability away from you if you're handling other people's sensitive information. So that's another reason why you should use a third party. I personally use a third party also who has the time for that. I don't do it every day. And so things are going to fall short, but I know what I want. And so you just got to make sure that you're managing the people that you're hiring that's on your power team. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, if you're managing them too much, just make sure you haven't locked in with them for 12 months. I mean, you should have a way out of that contract. I've seen some property management contracts. They're very, like, you're locked in, and they're going to change all your locks on you, and they have the master key and all this sort of thing. Make sure it's your terms, it's your, it's your rules, it's your property. Maybe there's a hybrid approach where you can meet in the middle on some things. Great questions, guys.
That's great. Thank you so much for those questions, and thanks to Danielle and Kory, and to everyone else who's been able to share and present tonight. And for those of you in the chat who've been contributing, we've seen lots of great comments throughout the course of the webinar as well. As was just mentioned, you know, we do have some great resources. So many of you have stayed throughout this presentation, and of course we want some takeaways. We've got some rent reporting applications and lease clauses from Front Lobby, some tenant notifications to inform them about rent reporting, an applicant notification as well that you can use as a screening tool. Strategic Success Consulting has offered a practical guide of 15 tips to avoid choosing the wrong tenant. So that's a really great resource that you can get as well. It's a must read for next placements. And also from our friends at Rent Panda, you've got 7 strategies to combat a high vacancy market, which, as Hart mentioned, we're sort of been entering and deepening into in the last number of months. So this is a perfect way to help you stay competitive and keep your units filled and ideally, you know, filled with the right kind of tenants. So those resources are available. You can scan the QR code. I think there'll be some follow-up email as well. I'm just
gonna throw it. Sorry, Steve. I'm just gonna interrupt here. If I can get the team to put the link in the chat, please. For people who want to download this, we can put the link in the chat for you guys. There's a couple other things here too that's coming your way. So hang tight, guys.
Yeah, we might have some additional surprises for you as well beyond what's on the screen here. Okay, thank you. And I think there's one other bonus slide here as well. If we could advance to the next slide. Thank you. Oh, no, back one. Just back one slide. You can do that. Well, I'll talk about it. We can't see it, but there we go. Thanks. There's also a great WhatsApp community. There's a number of communities you're going to see, Solo and Ontario Landlords Watch. There's also this WhatsApp community for support, referrals, opinions. Again, you can scan this. Maybe if we can get the link into the chat for this as well, that would be great. Next slide, we'll see there's lots of other ways to contact all of us here also. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We have Instagram handles, Facebook handles, TikTok handles, lots of ways to keep in touch. DM us, join communities. And I think, you know, we'd love to follow up this conversation and follow up with as many of you who are interested in finding out any more information from any of us here. So this is a way you can get a hold of us. We do have a couple minutes before we wrap up. If there are any additional questions, please feel free to put them up now, and we'll try to get to them as well. Maybe while we're waiting for that, I just go around the panel here, maybe for anybody. Oh, we do have a question here from Hetty, so thanks, Hetty. From Simcoe, thank you. How to get tenants to pay rent arrears when no fixed address can be found? Well, that's a great question. I might take a first stab at it. I assume, Hetty, obviously you're talking about a former tenant because they're you no longer have their address and they've moved on. So one thing you can do is you can start reporting them to the credit bureaus for the debt that's owing. You don't need their permission to do that. You can do that through our platform or Front Lobby. If there's an email at least that we can contact them with, we will send them every month information about the fact that their credit scores are being impacted by not paying their rent. We can help negotiate payment plans with them as well. And it is the case often that they're not going to share their address. If that doesn't work, through the platform, you can send them also through to collections, where they can do skip tracing and other ways to try to track them down. So that's I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that question.
Yeah, there's people that can help you trace people, and that's the best. That's the best course of action. Is just hiring somebody who's a professional who knows the avenues to hunt down. That's the way I would go. Can I ask the team to throw the links back in here? I got some people that are asking in the chat for the QR code, so if we can share the links again, please, that would be fantastic. And Mary Rogers was asking who the leasing agent was that was mentioned. That was Rent Panda. That's Hart here. That's on the call. So maybe Hart, I'm going to pull you up. If you wouldn't mind just saying how Mary could reach out to you or anybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find us at rentpanda.ca. Reach out on Instagram, reach out to hello@rentpanda.ca. But we do leasing, property management, paralegal services. And as a small landlord, I like to support small landlords through their journey. So feel free to book a call and we could just chat about any issues or help you out with leasing or property management.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm trying to comb through the comments, but I can't keep up. Any final questions before we wrap up?
So many questions there.
Pass my judgment from small claims to Equifax or TransUnion. If your judgment is specific to rental arrears, then yes, you can. Right now, it's only Equifax in Canada who has a rent reporting product. Although we're very close with TransUnion to be launching a rent reporting product in Canada as well. In the next few months, I believe that will go live, and I think we'll be the first to go live with them in Canada. So. I hope that answers the question. There's another question here. Did you report the tenants' paying habits to the rent bureau? How to do it? If you want to send an inbound request to front lobby, maybe Yvonne, if you can put up the contact information there as well to book a call, we can definitely walk you through how to do that. There's lots of information at frontlobby.com as well, where you can sign up and we can lead you down the path of how to get your lease record created and how to initiate rent reporting to the bureaus. If you're in Canada, again, it's currently Equifax, but we'll soon include TransUnion as well.
So Steve, real quick, looks like we're going over time a couple minutes. So Kory's going to bounce. We're going to do, yeah, we've
got a coaching program that we run every week, and I just want to encourage people, like, the conversation doesn't end here. Let's stay connected. Join the groups, join the Facebook groups, and all the, we've been sharing a lot of like stories of like, we want to let people know, like, eyes wide open, like, this is what could happen in real estate, but everything is fixable, everything is solvable, and there's actually going to be some really great opportunities here for the next couple of years. So don't be scared away. Just make sure that you have your ducks in a row, and that you have all the tools and resources at your disposal, which we're happy to share on this call. If people need any help with real estate investing or anything like that, just book a call with either of us, and again, I'll let you guys continue the webinar.
Okay, now get out of here. Okay, so if there's any students on this call, listen, I'm just going to say too, any students, you guys better be bouncing too and getting over there. There's no excuse for being late.
Thanks very much, Kory, for joining. Yeah, as we saw from this call, obviously this is a lessons learned call, so I don't want everybody to leave with the wrong impression. There are lots of great tenants out there. There are lots of great stories and great experience as well. And I know we will be putting together some future webinars with some of these great folks. We'd like to, this has been a really great reception from so many people to participate with us this evening. And there's no doubt in my mind that we'll be adding some additional webinars in the months ahead, and we'll tell some great stories as well, and not just the lessons learned stories. So thanks so much to everybody for joining us this evening. Thanks so much to our speakers again, Hart, Kevin, Kayla, Danielle, and Kory. Thank you all for volunteering your time and participating with us. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for the audience that's been here and for all the great comments through the chat throughout the course of the evening. Again, we'll be following up with the recording and making it available. Yeah, we look forward to continuing the dialogue in some future webinars as well. So thank you, and have a great evening, everyone.
Let's end with a whoop whoop. Come on, guys, let's do this.
Yeah. That's it.